scream tore through the Arizona desert night. "It's too big. I can't bear it," Neil cried out, her voice hoarse, her tall, powerful body trembling on the hastily laid bed of dry hay in the wooden cabin. Sweat and tears mingled as they streamed down the strained muscles of a once fearless Apache warrior. Now, that very body was betraying her. Jack Harlan knelt behind her, holding Neil tightly, as if letting go for even a second would cause her to shatter before his eyes. A farmer who had once faced sandstorms, droughts, and the death of his wife. But never had he felt this helpless. Outside, the desert wind howled through the old wooden planks. There were no neighbors, no town nearby, just a lone cabin, a terrified man, and a woman, fighting on the fragile edge between life and death. No one in the tribe had ever believed Neil could be a mother. They said her body was too big, too strong, too different. Those whispers had followed her all through her youth until the day the tribe turned their backs on her, calling her a mistake of nature. Jack had once thought their marriage was nothing more than a deal. A widowed man who needed strong hands on his ranch. A rejected woman in need of a roof over her head. No love. No children. No strings attached. But now, in the midst of Neil's agonized groans and gasping breaths, Jack realized a cruel truth. One single night of weakness had pushed the strongest woman he had ever known to the brink. And if Neil did not make it through this night, he would have to live the rest of his life with a question that would never have an answer. Was this late-blooming love worth the price of her life? Before that scream tore through the night, Neil had grown used to living in silence. She was raised among the Apache tribe with a body that stood out taller than most men, broad-shouldered, and limbs built like they were meant for war. While the other girls learned to dance, to weave, and dreamed of families, Neil learned to ride horses through sandstorms and haul the carcasses of game animals that weighed twice as much as she did. At first, the tribe took pride in that strength, but as Neil reached the age of motherhood, the way people looked at her began to change. The tribal healer shook his head. Then came the white doctor, brought in from a distant town. The conclusion was brutally identical. Narrow pelvis. Childbirth would be extremely dangerous. She could die on a bed of hay, he said, as if he were talking about the weather. From that day on, Neil was no longer spoken of as a woman, just a warrior, unnecessary. A body too big to be a mother, too different to be accepted. She left the tribe on a morning with no goodbyes, just a horse, a bag of belongings, and whispers trailing behind her. It was during those wandering days that Neil met Jack Harlan. Jack was a widowed farmer, living alone on the edge of Arizona. His wife had died giving birth to their first child, a wound that never truly healed. His ranch needed labor. He needed hands strong enough to battle the unforgiving land. Their first conversation was brief, cold, and to the point. "I'm not looking for a wife," Jack said. "I'm not looking for a husband," Neil replied. They married like signing a survival pact. No ceremony, no promises of love, no dreams of children. Just two people cast aside by life, leaning on each other to make it through. Jack made it clear from the beginning, his voice low and firm. "My wife died in childbirth. I don't want that to happen again. I just need someone strong beside me. I don't want children." Neil nodded. To her, that was not a loss. It was only a confirmation of what she had always known. This body was not made to be a mother. The first few months passed quietly. They worked side by side, spoke little, and never touched the painful memories that haunted them. Two closed-off souls, believing that this agreement would shield them from being hurt once more. But some cracks, no matter how deeply buried, are only waiting for the day they break open. That night arrived quietly. Like every other night on the Arizona frontier, the wind whispered low through wooden fences. A thin moon hung in the cloudless sky. The ranch lay still in the kind of silence Jack Harlan had grown used to ever since the day his wife died in this very bed. It was the anniversary of her death. Jack drank more than usual. The bottle of whiskey slowly emptied, while memories poured in. The image of the woman from years ago returned with brutal clarity: cold hands, fading breath, and the sound of a newborn's cry that barely made it into the world before becoming the last thing she ever left behind. Neil sat across from him, quietly mending a torn sack. She could feel the weight of his pain, even though Jack had never spoken of it. The small room grew heavy with everything neither of them dared to say. "Tonight," Jack finally spoke, his voice roughened by liquor. "Tonight I do not want to be alone." Niall looked up. The oil lamp cast her face in a warm glow, calm but wary. "We made it clear," she said slowly. Jack lowered his head, hands clenched tight. When he looked up again, the logic of a cautious man was gone from his eyes, replaced by the fragility of someone terrified of being alone. "Just one night," he said. "Let me forget. Let me not remember." Niall stood, taking a step back. She understood that feeling. She had lived with it her entire life. But the fear inside her ran just as deep. "The doctor said," Jack added quickly, as if trying to convince himself, "almost impossible to get pregnant. There will be no consequences." That sentence hung in the air, more dangerous than any blade. Niall was silent for a long time. The old whispers echoed in her mind. Not meant to be a mother. Too big. Too different. Maybe, she thought, they were right. Maybe this body truly could not bring life into the world. And in that single moment, a moment where both believed they were safe, Niall nodded. No promises, no love, just two bare souls, trying to patch the emptiness inside with fleeting closeness. The oil lamp dimmed. Darkness swallowed the room. Jack did not know that on the very night he tried to escape his loneliness, he had unknowingly planted the seed of his greatest fear. And Niall did not know that the first time she allowed herself to let down her guard was the exact moment fate began to demand its price. That morning arrived slower than usual. Niall stood in the middle of the ranch yard, desert wind whipping through her long, sweat-soaked black hair. She bent over and dry, heaved by the wooden fence, both hands gripping a post as if the ground beneath her were tipping. This feeling was not just exhaustion. It was not just stomach pain. It ran deeper, heavier, and more terrifying. When Niall placed a hand on her stomach, she knew. No need for a healer. No need for confirmation. The body once called incapable of giving birth was now carrying a life inside it. Jack returned from the stables and found her standing there in silence, her face stone cold. When Niall looked up at him, her eyes no longer held their usual calm but something sharper, laced with anger and dread. "You said there would be no consequences," she said, her voice low but trembling. "You said the doctor said it was almost impossible." Jack froze. What came next hit him like a hammer to the chest. "I am pregnant." Silence fell over the ranch. The wind stopped blowing. The birds stopped singing. All Jack could hear was the pounding of his own heart in his ears. "No, Dot, it can't be," he stammered. "They said, be quiet." Niall cut him off. "You gambled with my life, for one night of weakness." She stepped forward, each movement heavy, as if crushing all the whispered doubts of her tribe beneath her feet. "I told you from the beginning, I could die giving birth." Jack backed away, then suddenly dropped to his knees on the hard ground. A man who had never yielded to drought or poverty now trembled like a child. "I was wrong," he said, voice cracking. "I was selfish. I only thought about my own loneliness." Niall closed her eyes. In that moment, the image of Jack's late wife flashed through her mind, another woman who had not survived the birthing bed. "I am scared," Niall whispered, each word cutting like a blade. "I am scared I will die like she did, and you will be standing there again." Helpless, Jack looked up at her, tears falling freely. "If there is anything I can do to make this right, I will do it. Even if it costs me my life." Niall looked at him for a long time. The anger was gone. All that remained was one naked truth. The road ahead had no way back, and from that moment on, their arrangement of survival was over. In its place began a journey of life and death where both of them would have to face the greatest fear of their lives. Thank you so much for being here. If you liked the story, comment 1. They left the ranch before the sun rose. Jack tightened the saddle straps in silence, his calloused hands trembling slightly. Niall climbed onto her horse more slowly than usual. The body that once endured sandstorms without faltering now betrayed her with sudden waves of dizziness, as if the desert itself were testing her final limits. 2 days across, a land devoid of human life. By day, the Arizona sun poured fire from above, scorching every breath. By night, the cold wind sliced through their skin, forcing Niall to curl beneath a thin blanket. Jack stayed close, never letting her out of his sight. Each time she let out a faint groan of pain, his heart clenched like it was being squeezed in a vice. Once, Niall nearly fell from her horse. Jack had to catch her, wrapping his arms tightly around her tall frame. For the first time, he felt clearly and painfully that her strength was no longer enough to protect herself. When the town appeared on the horizon, Niall was nearly spent. The doctor there was an old man with silver hair, someone who had seen enough death to stop sugarcoating it. He examined Niall for a long time, his face growing heavier with each passing minute. Jack waited outside, cold sweat soaking through his shirt despite the room not being warm. Finally, the doctor pulled off his gloves and let out a deep sigh. "She is pregnant," he said, "and just like the warnings before, this birth will be extremely dangerous." Jack held his breath. "What are the odds she survives?" he asked, voice dry and hoarse. The doctor looked him in the eye, unflinching. 50-50. That number dropped into the room like a sentence passed down by a judge. "She needs absolute rest," the doctor continued. "No long rides, no heavy work. If she becomes exhausted or under stress, she could lose both herself and the child." Jack nodded, even as his throat closed up tight. From that day on, they stayed in town. Jack took on every job he could find, hauling crates, fixing stables, lifting rocks, anything to pay for medicine and a place to sleep. By day, he worked himself to the bone. By night, he returned to Niall's side, wiping sweat from her brow, listening to every breath as if it were the fragile thread keeping her tied to life. Niall watched him during those sleepless nights, her heart gripped by a fear she had never known. Not the fear of pain, but the fear that she would not have enough time to forgive. And in that unforgiving desert, they both understood. From this moment on, every passing day was a gift, and could also be their last. The next 7 months did not feel like time passing. They felt like layers of sand piling onto Niall's chest, each day heavier, harder to breathe, and impossible to shake off. She lay on a rickety wooden bed in their small rented room, with just enough light slipping through the narrow window to tell day from night. Her belly grew so quickly it frightened even her. The body that had once been the pride of an Apache warrior had become a battlefield, where each dull contraction reminded her that the life inside was demanding its place. Some nights, Niall clenched her teeth to keep from crying, not because of the pain but because fear had found its way into her bones. She had once accepted the idea of dying in battle, but dying in childbirth was a different kind of terror. Jack stayed by her side every day. In the morning, he left before the sun rose. In the evening, he returned with bloodied hands and a sweat-soaked back. But no matter how exhausted he was, he never sat down until he had made sure Niall had eaten, taken her medicine, and was in just a little less pain. There were moments when the pain hit so hard it curled Niall's body into itself. Jack would rush to grab her hand, holding it tight like if he let go, she would slip away from this world. "Do not let go," Niall whispered on one rare rainy night. "I am here," Jack answered, his voice rough. "I am not going anywhere." But when Niall slept, Jack sat alone by the window, staring down at the empty street. He remembered the look in his late wife's eyes before she died, that same fearful look, and each night, he asked himself how deeply he had repeated his past mistake. One night, Niall spoke softly, barely above a breath. "If I do not make it, do not hate the baby." Jack turned to her, heart breaking. "Do not say that," he whispered. "You will live. You have to." But Niall knew. Her body was being torn from the inside out by the very child it carried. Every movement made her gasp for breath. Every passing day was a roll of the dice. Those 4 months held no heroics, only the kind of patience that wears the soul thin. Only love shone through the simplest act, staying. And when the first wave of pain struck, signaling that the day had come, they both understood. The waiting was over. All that remained now was a raw and simple truth: to survive or lose everything. The pain came at midnight. No warning. No time to prepare. Niall jolted awake with a gasp caught in her throat, both hands instinctively clutching her belly. A violent contraction tore through her body so strong it pulled a scream from her lips she did not even recognize as her own. Jack woke instantly, catching only a glimpse of Niall's pale face under the flickering oil lamp. "It's time," she panted. It's coming. There was no time to get her to a hospital. The doctor was called in the middle of the night. And the moment he stepped into the simple wooden cabin, he knew this birth would not be merciful. He motioned for Jack to lay down Hay on the floor quickly, as fast as possible. Neol was helped to lie down. Her tall frame, once a symbol of Apache strength, now trembled under the relentless waves of pain. Sweat poured from her like rain, soaking her hair and the back of her shirt. Another contraction hit more brutal than the last. It's too big. I can't bear it. Neol's scream tore through the desert night, hoarse and raw. She arched her body, nails digging into the hay, as if clinging to the last thread of life. Jack knelt behind her, arms wrapped around her shaking body. He pressed his forehead to her back, his voice trembling with fear and fierce determination. "Look at me," he said, breathless. "You can do this. You are the strongest warrior I have ever known." Neol shook her head, tears spilling from her eyes. "I can't do this," the doctor shouted, louder than the wind howling outside. "Do not give up. I see the baby's head. When the next wave hits, you have to push." The next pain came like a storm. Neol screamed, summoning every ounce of strength left inside her, the strength of a woman once called too big, too different, unfit to be a mother. Jack held her tightly, whispering non-stop in her ear like an anchor to her soul. "Push. Just one more time." "You're almost there," the doctor yelled. "One more push." Neol squeezed her eyes shut. In that moment, all she could hear was her heartbeat and Jack's breath behind her. She gathered everything she had left and pushed one final time like a warrior delivering her last blow. And then, a cry rang out. Thin, weak, but alive. So achingly alive. The room fell silent for an impossible second. Jack broke down in tears. The doctor let out a breath of relief. And Neol, the woman the world had once doubted, lay there, spent. Tears streaming down her face. But alive. Dawn rose slowly over the Arizona frontier. The first light of day slipped through the wooden window frame, touching a room still heavy with the scent of sweat, medicine, and fear that had just passed. Neol lay still on the bed of hay, her body drained, but her breathing finally steady. Resting on her chest, a tiny life stirred softly, warm, real, alive. The baby girl let out a faint cry, then slowly settled. The doctor smiled and carefully placed the child into Neol's arms. She looked down, her eyes red and swollen. The woman once called too big, unfit to be a mother, now trembled for the opposite reason, because she was still alive, and because her child was here. Jack sat beside her, his calloused hands covering his face. When he finally looked up, the tears could no longer be held back. He reached out and gently touched the baby's soft black hair, as if afraid that even the slightest pressure might cause this moment to disappear. "She is healthy," the doctor said quietly. Both of them made it. Jack turned to Neol. In the morning light, she was no longer the lone warrior of the desert, nor the woman cast aside by her people. She was a mother exhausted, in pain, but standing after the storm. "What should we name her?" Jack asked, his voice breaking. Neol was silent for a moment, then whispered, "Hope, hope, hope that a body once doubted could do what no one believed possible. Hope that mistakes could be redeemed by staying, by responsibility, by love, learned through pain. Hope that true strength is not never falling but standing back up after believing there was nothing left to lose." Jack bowed his head and rested his forehead against Neol's hand. "I will spend my entire life making up for my mistakes," he said, "and becoming worthy of you, and of her." Neol did not answer. She simply squeezed his hand just enough for Jack to understand that some forgiveness does not need to be spoken. Outside, the desert remained as harsh as ever, but inside that small wooden cabin, something had changed forever. A child named Hope had been born. A body once called too big, unfit to be a mother, had created a miracle. And sometimes, the very place where others tell us we cannot, is where life truly begins. My friend, the love between Neol and Jack did not grow from beautiful promises, but from fear, mistakes, and responsibility they could not run from. It was forged in a brutal desert, where surviving each day demanded sweat, tears, and the courage to stay. They did not love each other because life was easy, but because when everything became its worst, they still chose not to let go. And perhaps that is the greatest truth this story leaves with us. Real love does not erase suffering, but it gives people the courage to walk through suffering together. In the end, I truly hope that all of you find peace and happiness, wherever you may be. I love all of you, our dear Wild West storytelling audience. Please, let me know how you feel about this story. Leave a comment right below. Type the number 1 if you enjoyed this story. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more dramatic Wild West stories coming next.